The real reason God has been so quiet. You've waited, you've prayed, you've obeyed, and yet heaven feels silent. You've asked over and over, God, where are you? You've searched for signs. You've replayed your last conversation with him. You've asked for confirmation, for a whisper, for a dream, anything, but all you've heard is nothing. And now your heart is weary. You wonder if you've done something wrong. You question whether God is disappointed in you. You start to replay your past sins, thinking maybe the silence is punishment. But what if I told you God's silence is not his absence, and this quiet you're experiencing has a sacred reason, one you must not ignore? Why God sometimes goes quiet. There are moments in every believer's life when God withdraws, not his presence, but his volume. He goes quiet not to abandon you, but to prepare you. Think about a teacher during a final exam. They are silent, not because they've left the room, but because it's your moment to apply what you've already learned. This is not the time to panic. It's the time to trust what he's already said, because God's silence is often strategic. It's not rejection, it's refinement. Silence is God's invitation to maturity. When you first started walking with him, he spoke often. Every little step came with reassurance. But now, you don't hear him the same way. And that's not because you're distant. It may be because you're growing. God doesn't whisper as loudly when he wants you to walk by faith instead of feeling. He is training you to stand, to discern, to trust what he planted in you, even when there's no external confirmation. This is not distance. It's discipleship. What if God is waiting on you? Here's a perspective shift. What if God is not speaking? Not because he's punishing you, but because he already gave the last instruction and he's waiting for you to act on it. You may be asking for the next step, but you haven't fully obeyed the last one. He's not ignoring you. He's waiting for alignment. He's already released a word. Now he's waiting for your movement. God is not a God of endless repetition. He expects us to treasure his voice enough to follow it the first time. Silence is not always a test. Sometimes it's a shift. Sometimes the quiet means something new is coming. Before God does something major, he often allows a pause, a stillness, a holy hush. This happened before Jesus began his public ministry, before his resurrection, before Moses received the law, before Elijah heard the still small voice. The silence is a rejection. It's the calm before the shift. So don't despise the stillness. Pay attention to it. What feels like silence might actually be God changing the frequency. God wants you to rely on his presence, not just his voice. You're looking for words, but God may be inviting you into presence. There are moments when he speaks, and there are moments when he simply is. In the silence, he teaches you to recognize him beyond the emotional high, beyond the perfect worship set, beyond the prophetic word from someone else. He's asking, will you still love me when I whisper instead of shout? Will you still follow when the cloud moves slowly? Will you still believe when you don't feel the fire? You've been listening for God, but have you been listening to noise? Let's be honest. Sometimes we don't hear God because we've turned up the volume of everything else. You're scrolling for answers, consuming spiritual content 24/7, jumping from podcast to preacher, the prophetic word, but never stopping long enough to sit in his presence alone. God doesn't always compete with the noise. Sometimes he waits for it to fade. Your breakthrough might be hidden in quiet obedience, not in louder revelation. Maybe he hasn't gone silent. Maybe we've just forgotten how to listen slowly. Could silence be a sign of trust? When God is quiet, it's easy to feel forgotten. But think about this. What if God is quiet because he trusts you? He knows you've matured. He sees your growth. And now, he's letting you walk forward in the strength of the word he already gave. This isn't abandonment. It's empowerment. It's God saying, I've built enough in you. Now walk it out. What to do when heaven is silent. Here's how to navigate this season. 1. Revisit what he last said. Look back at your journal, your prayer notes. What was the last thing you knew? Without a doubt, he asked of you. Have you done it? If not, do that first. 2. Strip back the noise. Take a break from seeking words through 100 voices. Seek one voice, his fast distractions, even spiritual ones. 3. Don't confuse emotion with truth. You may feel forgotten, but truth says, I will never leave you nor forsake you. Hebrews 13, verse 5. 4. Worship in the silence. When you can't feel him, worship anyway. When you can't hear him, sing anyway. Let your praise become your declaration of trust. 5. Stay rooted in the Word. God may not be giving you a fresh word today because he's teaching you to mind the eternal word that never changes. The Bible is not plan B. It's the foundation, a word from God's heart to yours. My precious child, I see your confusion. I feel your longing. And though I am quiet, I have not left you. I have not withdrawn because of anger, but because I want to show you something deeper than emotion. I want to show you my constancy. You've known me in the fire. Now know me in the stillness. You've trusted me in the storm. Now trust me in the calm. I am not absent. I am shaping you. And soon you will see this silence was the womb of something holy. Wait in me. Watch with me. And when the time is right, I will speak again. But this time, you'll hear me not just with your ears, but with your soul. This silence has a purpose. You are not being ignored. You are being initiated. This silence is God's way of sharpening your discernment, preparing you for the next level, teaching you to anchor in the Word, deepening your trust, separating you from dependency on feelings, because the next season you walk into will require more trust than ever before. Not trust in signs, but trust in God's unchanging character. Don't walk away. You're closer than you think. This is not the time to quit. This is not the time to question your worth. This is the time to remain still, to remain faithful, to remain present, because the quietest seasons often precede the loudest breakthroughs. He hasn't changed his mind. He hasn't revoked his promise. You're still chosen, still called, still covered. The silence won't last forever, but what it first will. A final prayer. Father, I don't always understand the silence. It feels heavy, confusing, and even scary. But today, I choose to trust you anyway. I believe you are still here, even when I can't feel you, even when I can't hear you. Teach me to lean on what I know, not what I feel. Teach me to rest in your character when your voice is still. Prepare me for the day you speak again, and make me ready to move when you do. I choose to remain. I choose to trust. In Jesus' name, amen. Why you're tired. Even when you're doing all the right things, you're doing everything you were taught to do. You pray, you show up, you serve, you believe, you try to stay positive. You've cut off toxic relationships. You've surrendered things to God, even things that cost you. So then why do you still feel exhausted? Why does it feel like you're giving your all and still coming up empty? Here's the truth no one wants to talk about. You can be doing all the right things and still feel spiritually burned out if you're not aligned, and you won't believe the reason. But please don't ignore it. The burnout of the obedient. Spiritual exhaustion isn't always caused by sin. Sometimes it comes from sincere obedience without clear alignment. Sometimes the weight you feel doesn't come from disobedience. It comes from overextension. You're pouring, you're helping, you're saying yes. But here's the question God is asking. Who told you to carry that? Not everything you're doing was assigned. Not everything you're saying yes to is part of your divine purpose. When you're walking out of obligation instead of calling, even good things will start to feel heavy. Heaven's definition of fruitfulness. We live in a world that measures worth by productivity, by how many things you do, by how busy you are. But heaven doesn't count the same way. Heaven doesn't measure by numbers. It measures by fruit, by obedience, by alignment. You may be doing more than ever before, but still producing less fruit spiritually. Why? Because when you step even slightly outside the lane God designed for you, you begin to strive instead of flow. You begin to grind instead of grow. And eventually, even spiritual activity feels exhausting. But I thought this was what God wanted. Maybe it was for a season, Or maybe you assumed the open door meant permanent assignment. Or maybe your heart was just so willing. You said yes before you asked God. But now you're depleted, not because you lack faith, but because you lack margin. Margin for rest. Margin for recalibration. Margin to hear again what God is actually saying now. Because God is not static. His voice moves. His instructions shift. And if you keep obeying an old word in a new season, you'll feel like you're walking in circles. The subtle drift from purpose. No one wakes up and says, I want to live misaligned. But it happens slowly. You start by filling gaps, helping where needed, saying yes because no one else did. And before you realize it, your calendar is full, but your soul is starving. You become reliable, but barely recognizable to yourself. You become respected, but not restored. You've been applauded, but not anointed for what you're actually doing. And slowly, you begin to wear a version of yourself that looks spiritual, but feels like a mask. You're not lazy. You're overextended. Let's clear something up. You are not failing because you're tired. You're tired because you've been too faithful to things God never asked you to carry. And now, it's catching up to you. Your soul is waving a flag. Your heart is signaling overload. And God is whispering something you haven't let yourself hear. Come back to alignment. What alignment really means. Alignment doesn't mean you do less. It means you do the right thing for the right reasons with the right grace. It means you move from performance to presence, from hustle to harmony, from survival mode to spirit-led momentum. Alignment is not laziness. It's strategic surrender. It's where your soul stops striving and starts receiving. Signs you're operating outside alignment. Be honest. Do any of these resonate? You're busy but not peaceful. You're productive but not joyful. You serve, but you secretly resent how much is expected of you. You have momentum, but no time to rest. You're helping everyone but feel completely unseen. If so, you're not broken. You're misaligned, and the fix is not more effort. It's realignment with God's priorities. The question that changes everything. Pause and ask yourself, Lord, what am I doing that you never asked me to do? It's a dangerous prayer, but it's a freeing one. Because when God answers, you begin to drop the unnecessary. You begin to silence the pressure to please people. You begin to move not out of guilt, but out of grace. Realignment requires recalibration. Getting back in alignment isn't instant. It requires you to slow down, to step away, to say no, to rest, to listen again. It may mean ending a project you were never supposed to start, delegating responsibilities you clung to for identity, saying no to things that stroke your ego but starve your soul, trusting that what God removes, He will replace with better. This isn't failure. This is refinement. You're not behind. You're being redirected. You might be thinking, but I've wasted time. I've poured so much into this path. Hear God's response. Nothing is wasted in my hands. Even your detours become data for your destiny. Even the wrong turns will become stories that sharpen your discernment. Even the missteps are covered by grace. You're not late. You're just being led back to the right road. What to do next? The realignment process. 1. Audit your life. Ask what drains me? What restores me? Where's God's presence easy to sense? Where's it strangely absent? 2. Revisit your why. Did you start this out of calling or compulsion? Were you trying to obey God or earn worth? 3. Invite God to reset the map. He won't force you to realign, but if you invite Him, He'll start rearranging the path gently. 4. Set boundaries. Obedience sometimes sounds like no. Protect your peace. Protect your capacity. 5. Prioritize His presence over performance. Rest. Be still. Worship with no agenda. Let Him restore you, not just physically, but spiritually. The power of a realigned soul. When you return to alignment, your joy returns. Your clarity sharpens. Your prayers carry weight again. Your relationships feel lighter. Your confidence rises, not from pride, but from purpose. You stop living exhausted. You start living empowered. Because finally, you're flowing in the rhythm of God's grace. What heaven wants you to know: you were never meant to serve on fumes. You were never meant to minister from burnout. You were never meant to say yes to everything just to prove your faithfulness. Heaven sees your heart. But heaven also wants your health, your wholeness. God is not glorified in your depletion. He's glorified in your alignment. When you're aligned, you're unstoppable. Not because of effort, but because of ease. Not because of striving, but because you're finally walking in step with the Spirit. A prayer for the tired believer. Father, I've been doing so much, trying so hard, saying yes to everything that sounded good, but now I'm exhausted. I won't live aligned, not for applause, not for appearance, but for you. Reveal to me what I must release. Refocus me where I've strayed. Restore the joy of my salvation. I don't want to be busy. I want to be effective. I don't want to perform. I want to walk in purpose. Lead me back to the center of your will. Amen. What you've been holding is what's holding you back. There's something you're still holding on to, something that once served a purpose. It may have brought comfort. It may have even felt like a blessing for a season. But now, it's no longer growing. It's no longer bearing fruit. And deep down, you know it. And here's the hardest truth to face. What you've been clinging to may be the very thing keeping you from stepping into the life God is trying to give you. It's not that your breakthrough is delayed. It's that you haven't made space for it. Because what you refuse to release, heaven cannot replace. The burden of a good thing gone stale. Some things God gives for a season, not for a lifetime. But we, in our desire for comfort, permanence, and clarity, try to stretch a temporary lesson into a forever possession. It might be a friendship that once helped you grow, a job that gave you stability, a mindset that protected you in a difficult time, a habit that made sense when you were hurting, but now they're no longer aligned, no longer anointed, no longer assigned, yet you keep them. Why? Because it's hard to release what you once relied on, even when you know it's holding you back. God's blessings don't expire, but assignments do. You prayed for that opportunity, and God gave it to you. You cherished it. You thanked Him for it. But now it's draining you. It's not expanding your soul. It's exhausting it. And here's the paradox. God doesn't remove things because they weren't once good. He removes them because they're no longer right. The blessing you received yesterday can become the burden of today if you stay too long in a place you were meant to pass through. Think of Abraham and Isaac. God gave Abraham a son, the miracle he longed for. Then God asked for that very miracle back, not because He's cruel, but because He wanted to see if Abraham trusted the giver more than the gift. What if your current season is God asking, do you trust me enough to release what you begged me for? Emotional attachment versus spiritual alignment. Let's talk about the weight you feel. Not all weight is external. Some of the heaviest burdens are emotional. You might be carrying relationships that no longer uplift but guilt trip. Conversations that leave you anxious, not edified. Cycles of hoping someone will change, even though God has already released you. Memories of better days that keep you stuck in the past. Guilt over walking away from people God has not called into your next. Here's a truth that hurts, but heals. Some people are no longer assigned to the version of you God is building. They were a part of the story, yes, but they're not part of the next chapter. And keeping them close out of fear or pity is not compassion. It's disobedience. God's method of making room. You've asked God to do a new thing. But friend, new wine requires new wineskins. New purpose requires new capacity. New healing requires letting go of old pain. Sometimes God doesn't remove people or patterns with noise. He does it with silence, with doors that close, with a restlessness that grows, with a gentle but unmistakable feeling. This doesn't fit me anymore. Don't ignore that feeling. It's not always emotional exhaustion. It's spiritual misalignment. And the more you ignore it, the heavier it becomes. The longer you delay, the more frustrated you'll feel. Because you weren't designed to carry expired things. You were designed to flow. Letting go is not giving up. It's giving God room. Here's what most people misunderstand. Releasing something doesn't always mean rejection. Sometimes it means obedience. You're not giving up on people when you let go. You're giving God space to move in a way only He can. When you let go of control, He brings clarity. When you release your grip, He begins to rewire your atmosphere. That's not failure. That's trust. Letting go isn't walking away. It's walking towards something greater. And sometimes the most powerful yes to God begins with a quiet, courageous no to everything else. But what if it hurts? Of course it hurts. Letting go isn't cold. It's courageous. It doesn't mean you stop loving. It means you love maturely. Enough to obey even when it breaks your heart. Jesus wept when He faced separation, but He still walked forward. Because purpose is not driven by emotion. It's driven by obedience. You can honor what something meant without letting it stop you from becoming who you're meant to be. You are not empty. You're being emptied so you can be filled. Sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is make room. Make room for healing, for joy, for new friendships, for unexpected miracles, for clarity that can only come in the absence of clutter. God is not trying to take away your peace. He's trying to clear space for real peace. Not the kind you manufacture, but the kind He pours freely when your hands are finally open. Practical signs you're holding on too long. Ask yourself, does this relationship feel more draining than nourishing? Am I constantly trying to fix something that God hasn't asked me to carry? Do I feel peace or confusion when I think about it? Has God spoken clearly, but I've rationalized delay? Do I feel stuck, not because of lack of opportunity, but because of attachment? If you said yes, it's time to pray not for more endurance, but for the courage to release. The reason you're still here, you may feel like you failed. You may feel like your hesitation has disqualified you. But hear this, you are still here because grace hasn't given up on you, and you still have time to let go of what's weighing you down. The reason you're still here is because your story isn't over. But the chapter you're in can't last forever. The new one can't begin until you release what no longer belongs. What you must do now, write it down. List what you're holding on to that feels heavy, expired, or misaligned. Pray over it. Don't just process it with logic. Process it in God's presence. Ask, Lord, is this from you, or am I just afraid to lose it? Release it emotionally and spiritually. You may not be able to end everything immediately, but you can start with your internal release, your surrender. Trust God with the empty space. Don't rush to refill it. Let God bring what aligns with His purpose, not just your comfort. A final word for your heart. You may never be fully ready to let go, but that's okay. God doesn't ask you to release from readiness. He asks you to release from obedience. And when you do, you won't just feel lighter, you'll feel aligned, free, ready, because now He finally has room to move. There's a question buried deep within you. You haven't spoken it out loud, maybe not even to yourself, but it's there. It rises up when your prayers seem unanswered, when your strength is exhausted, when you've done all the right things, and yet nothing seems to move. The question is simple, but it's heavy. It whispers in the background of your faith journey, and it sounds like this: God, why does everything fall apart right when it finally starts to feel right? You're not alone in asking. It's a question no one wants to admit they're asking because it feels like doubt. It feels like betrayal. It feels like giving up on the very God you've clung to through the darkest nights. But here's the truth. Asking this question doesn't mean you lack faith. It means you're human. It means you've reached the depth of your capacity. And maybe, just maybe, you're finally ready to hear the answer because you won't believe the reason. But please, don't ignore it. You're not being punished. You're being prepared. The enemy wants you to believe that repeated disappointment is evidence that God is displeased with you. He wants you to internalize every delay as punishment, every closed door as rejection. But what if the pattern of things almost working out is not punishment, but positioning? What if the resistance you felt wasn't there to crush you, but to condition you? What if the very thing you thought was evidence that God had left was actually the proof that He was right there working behind the scenes? The hidden spiritual pattern. Here's something you need to understand. Before God blesses, He often breaks. Before He releases, He refines. Before He promotes, He prepares. And preparation often feels like contradiction. It looks like disappointment. It disguises itself as delay. Not because God is cruel, but because He protects what He prepares. He knows that if He gave you the next level before you were truly ready, it would become a burden, not a blessing. You've been asking, why does it keep falling apart? But the deeper question is, what in me still needs to be strengthened before I step into what's next? You haven't failed. You've outgrown the old framework. Think back. Think of the time something started well, only to unravel. Maybe it was a job, a relationship, a ministry, a dream, and you started believing you were cursed, unlucky, or not spiritual enough. But what if the collapse wasn't failure, but divine demolition? God won't build anew on an unstable foundation. He won't let you construct a life on top of things that can't support your calling. So sometimes He allows things to shake, so the false things fall away. That relationship that ended, it might have looked godly, but it wasn't aligned. That opportunity that slipped through your hands, it might have been good, but it wasn't God's best. You see, the unraveling as pain. God sees it as preservation. God is not withholding. He's filtering. You've been asking God for clarity. But clarity doesn't always come in the form of signs. Sometimes, clarity comes in the form of confrontation. God doesn't always say no with words. Sometimes He says no with disruption. That uncomfortable feeling that kept growing, that gnawing sense that something wasn't right, that door that suddenly slammed shut, that was God filtering. Because the next chapter of your life is too sacred to be shared with the wrong people, the wrong mindset, or the wrong version of you. So yes, He allowed some things to break, but not to destroy you, to deliver you, the battle behind the battle. And here's what's even more surprising. You've been fighting visible problems, but the true battle has never been about what's in front of you. It's been about what's within you. That pressure you're feeling, it's not just situational, it's spiritual. Because the moment you start to grow, the enemy starts to panic. And he doesn't need to ruin your life. He just needs to get you to doubt God's hand in it. If he can make you misinterpret the pressure, he can steal your promise. But God is using the very pressure the enemy hoped would break you to reveal who you are without filters. He's allowing the questions so you can discover answers that are rooted in truth, not fear. You're closer than you realize. Here's the wild thing. You may feel stuck, lost, behind schedule, but from heaven's perspective, you are right on time. You've passed through the furnace. You've wept in silence. You've kept walking even when you wanted to crawl. That is not weakness. That is spiritual endurance. And that endurance is what God honors. He doesn't just bless those who shine. He blesses those who stay. And you, my friend, have stayed faithful, stayed hopeful, stayed humble. And because of that, the shift you've been praying for is closer than you think. The truth you can't ignore. So what's the reason things keep falling apart right before they break through? It's not because God changed his mind. It's because he's been protecting your future from premature exposure. He's not setting you back. He's setting you apart. So when it's time, you'll step into the next season with discernment, depth, and the capacity to carry what he gives you. Because elevation is not about looking impressive. It's about being ready. So if things have fallen apart lately, don't ignore it. Look again. See the fingerprints of Father who loves you too much to allow you to settle for a life less than what he's written for you. What you should do now, stop asking, why me? Start asking, what's being shaped in me? You're not the victim of life. You're the product of divine preparation. Start filtering your feelings through faith. Just because it feels bad doesn't mean it is bad. Growth often feels like grief. Write down what keeps breaking. Patterns reveal purpose. If it keeps falling apart, God might be calling you to rebuild it differently. Declare this over yourself. God is not done with me. He is preparing me, and I will not miss what he's doing just because I don't understand it yet. You won't believe the reason why things had to fall apart, but one day you'll look back and realize everything made sense. Every delay was a gift. Every loss created space for the real blessing. But don't wait until later to trust that. Trust it now. Don't ignore what's breaking. It may be the very thing God is using to build the life you prayed for.